As a busy person, I love cooking in bulk so that I can save them in my freezer and be eating it small. So I wasn't having any food left in my freezer, so I decided to cook and store them in the freezer. So today I'll be making about 7 different foods, which include groundnut soup, okra stew, vegetable stew, potom, banku, kontomire stew, and some rice. So yeah, I started off by steaming my chicken and then also steaming my groundnut paste. So yeah, after steaming my chicken, I decided to take a portion of it and fry it for my vegetable stew. So yeah, that is me frying my chicken. And now I added groundnut paste to my chicken. I allowed that to simmer a bit. I was impressed by the oil that was on top, and now it was time to add water. So I added a significant amount of water. I added my garden eggs, some peppers, and then I added tomatoes. I added Kobe, and this is my almighty ingredients, opamomoni. So yeah, it was time to also do my okra stew. I started off by also frying Kobe and some momoni. I added some momoni and Kobe to my cocoyam pottage, and then I also added some oil in my saucepan at the back there for my vegetable stew. So yeah, I added some tomato paste to the okra stew base and some to the vegetable stew base. That is me stirring it and making sure that it is evenly distributed in the pot. So yeah, now back to the okra stew. So I fried it, the tomato paste a little bit, and then I added this tomato ginger pepper mixture to it. I added just a little bit to it. I feel so sorry for that crab over there, so I added my washed oyster to it. That is adode. Yeah, there's no okra stew without adode that would taste good, trust me. Kidding, by the way. So after frying my tomato paste for about 10 minutes, I added the remaining blended tomato ginger garlic paste to it, and now it was time to focus on my okra stew. So I added my washed shrimps to it. I also added 2 tablespoons of ginger garlic paste to it. I stirred it and allowed it to mix properly. The next thing I added was my chicken stock and the remaining chicken, the one that I set aside for the okra stew. So I stirred it and made sure that it was well coated with the sauce. So yeah, it was time to focus on my groundnut soup. So I blended some abeju, also known as turkey berries, along with the tomatoes, onions, and peppers that was in my soup. So after blending, I added it to the soup, and now it was time to also focus on my vegetable stew. So I added this peas to it. Yeah, I like this peas so much in my vegetable stew. So I added salt and some seasoning cube to my soup. Yeah, and now it was time to also check up on my okra stew. So after a good mix, I added my steamed fish to it. So I'm using salmon for the okra stew, and then I'm using the red fish for the groundnut soup. So I added the salmon to the okra stew, and then I gave it a good mix, and then I added the red fish to the groundnut soup. Yeah, at this point it was almost ready, so it was the best time to actually add my red fish to it. So I gave it a good mix, and now it was ready. So yeah, I checked up on my stew again. I added my cooked okra to it. So this contains garden eggs, and then also it contains boma, also known as eggplant leaf. So yeah, I added this mixed spices to my vegetable stew base. I gave it a good mix, and now it was time to add my corned beef to it. So I added my corned beef. The remaining didn't want to come, so I had to use fork to force it out of the tin. So that is me removing the remaining from the tin. So after that, I gave it a good mix, and now it was time to add my eggs. So I added about 5 eggs. I whisked it very well, and then I added it to my stew. I allowed that to simmer for a bit, and then I added my chopped carrots. So yeah, I gave it a good mix, and then I added my fried chicken to my stew. So my cocoyam pottage wasn't cooking faster, so I placed it on my stove so that it could cook faster. Yeah, so this contains cocoyam and a little bit of sweet potatoes. Yeah, the sweet potatoes is completely optional, but I like to add it just for extra sweetness. So yeah, that is me just adding my tomatoes, some onions, and then some fresh peppers to it. You know, I already added some Kobe and momoni to it. So yeah, after that, I came back to my stew. I added my shredded cabbage to it. I gave it a good mix, and now it was time to add my sweet pepper to it. So yeah, I added my sweet pepper and some spring onions to it. So that was the last thing I added. I gave my stew a good mix. I came back to my cocoyam pottage. I added some dried fish to it, and then I gave it a good mix, and then I added some tuna to it. So yeah, after adding my tuna to it, I gave it a good mix again, and then I took out the tomatoes, the onions, and then the pepper from it. So I came back to my stew. I gave it a good mix. Now it was ready. So I added a little bit of tomato paste to my cocoyam pottage, and then a blended mixture to it. I also added some salt and some seasoning cube to it. Yeah, so I forgot to add my abedu to my tomato mixture. That is the turkey berries. I like adding it to most of my dishes because of the nice aroma and taste that it gives to my meal. So I blended it separately and I added it to it. I added some fried palm oil. So yeah, I fried some palm oil with onions and then I poured it. I forgot to take a video of that, so yeah, just enjoy this. So it was ready and now it was time to cook my consomme stew. So I added the remaining ginger and garlic paste to the oil, and then I added some kobe and some momone to it. I gave it a good mix and I added some tomato paste and then tomato, ginger, garlic, onion mixture to it. I gave it a good mix and then I added my turkey berries. I didn't blend it smoothly, I just blended it roughly. I added it to it. I added some curry powder. Multitasking is not a joke, trust me. Multitasking is not a joke. Cooking different foods in one sitting is not a joke, but yeah, that is what I like to do. I like doing it so that I can keep it in my freezer and be eating it small. It saves me a lot of time. I added some eggs to my agushi. I whisked it very well until it was very smooth. I know most people don't like doing that, but for me, I like to add eggs to my agushi. It serves as a thickening agent. So yeah, that is why I like adding it to it. So after whisking it very well, I poured it into my stew. I covered it, I allowed it to boil, and then I added my consomme to it. There are times whereby I like to cook my consomme a little bit before I put it in my stew, and there are times whereby I just go in directly. So today I wanted to just put it directly in my stew. So yeah, I placed it directly in my stew. I give it a good mix. I allowed that to boil for a bit and then I covered it. So after that, I added some tuna to it. This tuna is actually not salted. So yeah, it was completely okay for me to add it at the end of the stew. So I added some fresh pepper with onions for garnishing. Give it a good mix. I allowed it to simmer for about 2 minutes and now it was ready. So at this point, my stew and soups are ready. So now it's time to cook the banku and the rice. So this was how everything was looking at the end. I allowed it to cool down completely before I portioned them and put them in my freezer. Everything tasted so good. I didn't even know what to eat at that point because everything was looking so good and tasted amazingly well. Yeah. And I finished around 11 p.m. in the evening. I was so tired, honestly, but I loved doing it. So yeah, that is what matters. Thanks for watching. Bye.